Welcome, everybody, to Firehouse Talks with Jersey Rick, Igniting Leadership Excellence. I'm Rick Davis, and this is my co-host, Emily.
Hello.
Welcome to episode number 6. Are you reinforcing bad behavior and performance?
Mm.
Yes.
Good title. So, in this episode, we are asking if supervisors reinforce bad behavior and performance. I think it's not an if, it's a when.
When, yes, because it happens. It happens a lot. And with you, Emily, I'm thinking of a particular situation in one of your workplaces that you were at for quite a while, where absolutely the supervisor was reinforcing not only bad behavior, folks,
Yeah,
but illegal,
yeah,
illegal behavior.
yeah.
So that's our topic today.
Definitely.
Are you reinforcing bad behavior and performance?
Yeah. So, in this question connected with chapter 3 in your book, and I'm going to hold it up for those who are watching, the furnace of leadership development. You have a chapter called, I crack up at this one. It's alive, inheriting an organizational monster.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that and who are these people?
Yeah. Who are the monsters and who are the people? I want to add into the subtitle of my book is How to Mold Integrity and Character in Today's World, which we
Absolutely.
talked a lot about in episode number 2 and how that is lacking because it ties into this. I said in episode number 2 that integrity, trust, and credibility form a triad of strength.
Yeah.
And integrity is the rock solid foundation. And when that is cracking or it's not there to begin with, that's where we have problems. And it leads into organizational monsters. So, yes, this topic definitely has to do with this.
We should
And
have spooky music playing when we talk
yeah,
about
yeah,
the
that's what you should have.
organizational
Should
monsters.
have should have spooky music. If you've ever watched the movie Frankenstein, the black and white version from the 1930s, or read what's her name, Shelley, I can't remember her name now. The
No.
author of Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein, was a grave robber, or Igor, his assistant, was the grave robber, and they put together a body attempting to make a human being,
Yeah.
and so they just come up with a monster. That's who these organizational monsters are, and they're lurking around in every organization.
Mm.
I remember an individual that we dealt with that had been on my shift. And after that problem was taken care of, the fire chief said, "Well, fellows, don't worry. Another nail will pop up that we got to take care of." And he was right.
Yeah.
When one goes away or the one's dealt with, there's always another one that comes up.
Yeah.
Well, why?
They're like whack-a-moles.
Yeah, yes, it is. It's like they could be like whack-a-moles. So your question, Emily, was who are these people?
Yeah.
Well, they're ones that have a tendency to really put on a pretty good show when it
Mm.
comes time to, seeking the job.
Charismatic.
Yeah, yes, charismatic.
Yeah.
They can carry on a conversation.
Yeah.
As I
Come
wrote
across knowledgeable.
Yes, as I wrote
Yeah.
in the book, their resume can look like something that Shakespeare wrote, himself. It's like,
Mm.
oh, this is fantastic. Yeah. And I've sat on a number of interview panels over the years, all the way from entry-level firefighter up to the fire chief's level.
Yeah.
And the higher up the rank, the longer the interview panel is. And hey, folks, at least for our organization, it was never just one interview panel. There was always
Multiple.
more interview panels that were taking place. But I'll come down to the entry level position where we generally allotted 30 minutes to interview a person. That's not a lot of time.
Mm-mm.
Hell, when you have a number of applicants that you're going to interview, And we're here in Colorado, and maybe the applicant that's coming in before us, came down from Montana or, Virginia or someplace like that. You don't know except what's on paper, what's in their application, what's in their resume. And then we would have 30 minutes to ask them questions, and they would get graded and scored to determine whether or not they were going to move on to the next panel, or we were just going to tell them, hey, thank you for your time and your effort, but you're not moving on.
Hmm.
Pardon me. One of the other things that we were doing is people who were moving forward to the Chiefs panel, they would be required to come right along with one of two of our stations for 12 hours. And the crews would then watch them, monitor them. The officers there would fill out an evaluation sheet, and that would become part of their package to determine whether or not they were somebody that were going to fit in with the culture of the organization and someone that, we could hire. So we had a lot of steps to screen people, but you know
Yeah.
what? People could still slip through.
Oh, yeah.
They still slip through. Uh, there was a time period that you worked in human resources in another city, and I
Yeah.
know very well you saw some of those things take place
Yeah.
as well. So even as well intentioned as the interview panel can be, these people can get through because they look good on paper, they present themselves very well. They don't have anything that is outstanding, because we always do a background check, so hey,
They
there's
know how to like fly under the radar, but
absolutely.
they're master
Yes,
manipulators.
they are master manipulators. So there's nothing on their police record. Maybe they got a ticket at some point, in their life, but there's no felonies, no
Yeah.
arrests, anything like that. These people don't have, your organizational monsters do not have to have a criminal record.
To be bad.
Yeah, to be bad. They
Yeah.
they they don't have to have that. And what happens is, well, we had a 1 year probationary period. And the ones who are good at putting on the show, they can make it through the recruit academy. They can make it out into the stations. And some departments would rotate people around different stations on a quarterly basis. No, ours didn't. But there are departments that are right here in Colorado that do that. Oh, it could be well and fine. Then the probation comes to an end, and that's it. Their true self comes out.
Hmm.
And during that probationary period, they were at will employees, meaning that, yeah, we're going to handle things progressively in a progressive disciplinary process, but they're going to be terminated. Bye bye. Once they go past that probationary period, they become for cause. There's got to be specific calls at
Yeah.
that point. And I can tell you, I've lived this, and it involves a lot of paperwork to do it. Why did I live this? It's because the organization created the monster and they allowed the monster to thrive. they
Hmm.
this person just continued along. But we'll get to that here in a minute. I don't
Yeah.
want to get too far ahead of myself, but I do want to reference the Bible, Matthew chapter 7, verse 15, where Jesus said, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. Why did I select this verse to describe these type of people? It's because that's exactly what they are. These
Yeah.
organizational monsters are not the hideous freaks with fangs hanging out of their
Hmm.
mouths and the horns visibly growing out of the top of their head, you know, but they are a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yeah.
And they're very, very dangerous. I know.
And deceitful.
Yes, and
Yeah.
deceitful. Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when you think about like even a perpetrator, sometimes you think of someone who's like on the street or is like all tatted up or
Mhm.
looks a certain way, but sometimes the really ones, the most scariest ones that you have to look out for are the ones in the suit and tie.
Yeah,
Like they're
right.
just right there in plain sight.
Well, just even here recently this week, I was reading in the newspaper about a school district employee in another part of Colorado that is going to jail for pedophilia.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Wow.
he had been working in the school system, and we see
That's
that not
scary.
only in school systems, but you see it in churches,
Yep.
so forth, like that, to where it's like, oh, these are fantastic people,
Yeah.
and all the while, no, they're not. These
Yeah.
these people here, those people there, hesitate to call them people, but those individuals that are pedophiles, they're more than just an organizational monster.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, they're creeps. They ought to be just locked away for good. Period. Bang.
Absolutely. So back on track. Let's talk more about the evil change that takes place in employees like this.
Yes, the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Ooh, yeah,
Yes, the ones that come across as so well, so good.
yeah,
And, I just gave an example of the ones that are hired, from an entry level. But in this particular one, right here, let's talk about the promotional process. Someone that has come into the organization, and as you described it, Emily, they have flown under the radar,
yeah,
and their supervisors have written glowing evaluations on them.
yeah. Can't say
You know,
anything wrong about them.
I can't say anything wrong about them. And we're going to talk about that here in a little bit as well. So I don't want to jump ahead, but they've had glowing evaluations. Promotion time comes up and they do very well in the promotional process. They've studied the materials. They know what they're supposed to say. I've seen, hey, people, I've seen some of these folks out there that in the room they could tell you what needs to be done tactically on scene at a fire. But out there in the street, they can't get it done.
Hmm.
They're good back there in a non-emergency situation, but out there in the street where the pressure's on, where the building is really on fire, or the car really is on top of itself and they need to be extricated, or the boat is flipped over and people are out there in the water, they can't perform under that type of pressure. But they did well in the interview process. They did well in the tactical exercises.
Hmm.
And so there they are. You know, they get promoted.
Wow.
And it's interesting that they have a reputation, but lots of times it's pushed down.
Mm,
That reputation that these people have is pushed down.
yeah.
They're afraid to
I was
people are
going to
afraid to
say people
talk
are
about it. Yeah,
afraid to stand
yeah,
out
they're
or
afraid to
stand out,
stand up.
stand up.
Yeah, yeah, stand up. They're afraid to talk
Yeah.
about it. And so then when that individual does get promoted, what's the talk in the organization? Are they nuts?
Yeah.
Are they crazy? Don't they know this? Don't they know that? No, we didn't know.
Because no one was brave enough to stand up.
Right. No one
And
was brave enough to
yeah.
stand up. And as a battalion chief, when I would sit on these interview panels, sometimes I hear, well, didn't you guys know? No, no, we got a lot of people. I had a lot of people working on the shift. And, you know, even though some people think that the Chiefs know everything, no, 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 that's a misnomer. Until someone has the courage to step forward and say, "This is what is taking place
Yeah.
out here in the station," or "This is what's taking place out there in the warehouse," you know, people don't know. They don't. They absolutely don't know. So people have to speak up. Now, one individual was fond of saying he picked up on this thing. Las Vegas ran a promo campaign several years ago. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Yeah, yeah, well, yeah. Hey, that's a great promo campaign for Vegas,
Yeah.
but that doesn't work in the workplace.
No.
You got a supervisor that's telling his or her people what's said here stays here. What's said in the rig stays in the rig. What's said in the station stays in the station.
Hmm.
Okay, that, my friends, is what our brothers and sisters in the police department called a clue. That's a clue that something is wrong.
Yeah,
Something's
that's a
going
red
on.
flag.
If I have to say what's said here stays here, why?
And you can almost take it a step further, and that's almost a borderline or right on the line of abuse too.
Yeah, it's definitely
Manipulation
manipulation.
tactic.
It's not like,
Yeah.
as a battalion chief, I've got the officers on the shift in front of me, and I say, okay, here, commit this to memory. I'm sharing the nuclear codes with you. You don't share this with anybody else. Otherwise, we might obliterate somebody's country. No, it's nothing like that. No, if there's something sensitive in nature before it gets shared, why is it being shared?
Yeah.
And in the military, from a classified information standpoint, I learned early on, and it was reinforced, called a need to know.
Mm,
Do you have a need to know?
yeah.
But that, what's said here stays here mentality, that's indicative of an issue that is taking place.
Yeah. So, what type of work environment is created by this dual personality?
We've heard a lot over the years about a toxic work environment, but
Yeah.
one of fear and intimidation,
Mm,
because that person is intimidating the people that are, are working for
yeah.
him or her. They are creating that atmosphere that where they are afraid to say something. And not only that, they create an atmosphere where people do not want to go to work.
Yeah.
And all we got to do is jump on the internet and search Google or YouTube or any other source about workplace stress, and you'll find out that where that stress is created.
Yeah.
It's created by the people who either own the business or in the management team or they're in the chain of command someplace.
Yeah.
That's where the problem lies. It's always in the supervisory areas. Hey, you got a lot of turnover taking place in your business, your organization. And when they're leaving, you do the so-called exit interview. Well, I get paid better money over there, Schmuckatelli and Sons. Yeah, really? Is it that? Or is it because Joe Schmuckatelli's cousin is working for you and is so bad that they're driving out your employees?
Yeah. That's so true.
Hmm.
And then, as the person in the authority position or leadership, if you're noticing a pattern of all these employees leaving, you need to realize like there's a problem.
Yeah,
What are you going to do about that?
yeah. And
Like there's a pattern happening there.
herein lies an ego issue.
Yeah.
Because if it is, let's say, an owner of a small business and there's this constant turnover, chances are
Yeah.
that owner is too egotistical to stop and look inside and say, what is going on here?
Yep.
You and I are very familiar with a situation that, your sister, our other daughter, Rebecca, was working at a place and it was absolutely a toxic environment.
Yeah.
And they were all women. Yeah. And it was like a sulfuric acid environment. And when it came to a head, the people were saying, well, we didn't know, even after she had been telling them, what was going on there. It's like, well, we didn't know. It's a complete total denial.
Yeah.
Last night, I was reading about the Holocaust that took place in Germany, in the late 1930s, all the way up to 1945. It's the Holocaust that a lot of people in this world today want to deny. Hey, folks, it happened.
Yeah.
And there were people back then during that time that just turned their head. No, we don't want to see it. We don't want to see, what is going on here. And so it creates an environment of apathy, you know, not me. I don't want anything to do with this. I'm not going to say anything.
Lack of integrity.
Lack of integrity. I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job or I'll get, a bad evaluation. That's a bad environment. That's an environment people don't want to work in.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how does this reinforce bad behavior and poor performance?
Well, it comes back to the creation of these monsters, to begin with. Supervisors can be fearful of confrontation. I believe, just watching people over the years, that the majority of people don't like confrontation.
Mm-mm.
However, You know, when you're in a supervisory position and you're a leader, that's one of the jobs is
Mhm.
confrontation. And hey, folks, confrontation doesn't mean you ride in on your great big white horse, jump off with a club and beat the living crap out of them. You know, I'm not talking about that.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the intestinal fortitude and courage to sit down with the problem and confront them with it. This is the issue. This is what's taking place here with you. This is what I see. What is happening here? What makes you do this? Why is this occurring? So then, when that doesn't happen, it gets reinforced in those glowing evaluations.
Mm.
I had
Yeah.
an individual that I had to deal with that previous supervisors that they I would hear them curse this guy. They said nothing good about this guy. I had my battalion chief that would come out to the fire station before I got promoted, and he'd say, "Hey, let's go outside." And we'd go outside in the front ramp. He'd stand out there and he'd complain about this guy. He said nothing good about this guy. He'd curse him.
Hmm.
Yeah, he every name that you could possibly think of, he'd vent and he'd get in his vehicle and go back downtown. Well, when I got promoted and I looked in this guy's personnel file because he's on my shift, there's nothing bad about this guy. Nothing.
Wow.
Nothing. I didn't know who I was more mad at, Emily.
Hmm.
The guy that was the problem, or the people, the supervisors
That
who
just let him get
badmouth,
away.
yep, badmouth this guy and constantly let him get away with it. So
Wow.
somebody else down the road, myself and the operations chief now, we were the ones that had to confront and deal with this issue.
Hmm.
So you're a supervisor, there's methods, and we're gonna talk about this here briefly in a couple minutes. Don't let this stuff go. We
Yeah,
have to handle it.
absolutely. So, who pays for this, these
Ev-
organizational monsters?
Everybody pays for it. Everybody, even the supervisors who think that they are getting away with it themselves because they don't have to sit down and have the hard, difficult conversations with
Yeah.
them. Everybody pays for it. And in an emergency organization, fire, police, EMS, the citizens, they pay for it
Mm.
as well. The taxpayers pay for it. The visitors in the
Yeah.
community, they pay for it. In a nonprofit organization, the people pay for it. We know that there's churches out there that have a toxic environment.
Yeah.
Well, who gets the black eye over that?
The church people
Christ.
or Christ.
Christ gets the black eye
Yeah.
over that. Because of a toxic environment that exists in a church. There's toxic environments that exist in corporations. And
Hmm.
so everybody pays. These these monsters are not only Frankenstein's, but they're Dracula's, vampires. They suck the lifeblood out of everybody.
Yeah. Hmm. So, how should the organizational monsters be handled?
Short of driving a silver stake through their heart, like what happens in the horror movies. Hey, supervisors, if you're going to you want to run around and say you're a leader, well, that means that you got something. It's called a backbone, a spine. You
Yeah.
know, if you've got a sweet potato vine growing up your back, then you're just going to run off and be a coward someplace, because you're afraid of them, and they know that you are afraid of them. They know that you're not a leader. They know that you're a manager. They know that you're like the cowardly lion in the Wizard of Oz. They
Yeah.
know that stuff.
Yeah.
Years back, I do still do a lot of hazmat teaching. And I had an opportunity, was out in the Long Beach area in California, and I was out taking pictures to use in the class. And I came across down at the docks, chicken of the sea. And I took a picture of the sign, the chicken of the sea. It's the tuna fish people, chicken of
Mhm.
the sea. And I've used that in my classes since then. You know, if you're not making decisions, if you're not leading, you're not doing your job, you're the chicken of the sea. You know, leadership requires courage, and you must sit down with these people. You must talk to them. Hey, and there's places that you could go to. There's a fantastic book called Crucial Conversations.
Yeah.
Buy it, read it, refer to it. Talk to people who have experience in dealing with these organizational monsters so these problems can be handled and they could be nipped ahead of time. So it's not 10 years down the road, somebody else is dealing with the problem that you refuse to deal with.
Yeah.
Because that person who's your friend now very much could turn into your enemy later on because they're dealing with the problem that you didn't deal with.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And separate them and isolate them as much as possible. I
Mm.
separated an individual 1 year. I brought the person downtown to fire station 1, and I said to this individual, you're negative and you're toxic and you're poisoning the rest of the shift. I'm bringing you down here where you're closer to me, and I'm putting you with a lieutenant that I know is going to make sure that you aren't poisoning other people.
Wow.
You have to separate them. Hey, especially remote work locations. Watch it. They're out there. And it's not isolated.
Mm-mm.
And those of you who are in the fire service, you know what I'm talking about. There could be a wildfire burning and it's not up on the side of the hill. It's within the organization. You must separate these people. You must deal with them. It's a cancer.
Yeah.
It's a cancer. If you have a tumor growing inside of you, well, you got a choice. Am I going to do something with it and it continues to grow? Or am I going to go seek out medical treatment?
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to document
Yes,
too.
yes, thank you. Well, nearly
Yeah.
forgot that one. You got to document. You don't need to write a narrative, but you got to document this stuff. Document the good, not just the bad.
Yeah.
Some supervisors out there, they're very good. All they document is just the bad. Document the good as well.
Yeah. So the $1 million question
Uh-huh.
is, can people change?
Absolutely, people can change. Now, there's a mentality out there that people can't change. You may, and I write about this in my book, some of you may be familiar with the analogy. Set a bucket of water in front of somebody and tell them to put their fist in it and then pull it out. Is there a hole? No. Well, that's what happens when you leave the organization. Nobody knows. Nobody cares. Well, that goes back to how do you value people. People can
Yeah.
change. I will say, though, that it's a difficult road. It could be a
Mhm.
very difficult road. I had to deal with a Lance Corporal when I was in the Marine Corps who had an issue, and I want to be very more vague on this. If you want to learn more about it, go buy The Furnace of Leadership Development. There's no names that are involved with it, but I saw this person, you know, take a decline in their behavior and in their performance. They were not showing up to work on time, and they were starting to say, well, I'm going to sick call. Well, I followed up and I found out that this person wasn't at sick call. And
Mm.
when I confronted the individual broke down and said, don't you? Yes, it's very obvious. The person was having a problem with alcohol.
Mm.
They were constantly drinking.
Wow.
And it was evident. It was evident when this
Yeah.
Marine was showing up at work. Well, that person, was dealt with, was disciplined, for not reporting to duty when they were supposed to be on duty.
Yeah.
We had to take care of it that way, but also we made sure that that Marine got help. That person changed.
Mm. I think that's such a great
Mhm.
point because I think with you're asking the question, can people change? It comes down to, is this in their character,
Yes.
or is it that they've fallen on hard times
Mhm.
like this person, or fallen into addictions and truly want to put the work into and change?
And I want to add, folks, that I'm a firm believer that there is a master change agent, and it's Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And when people put their faith and trust in Christ, they change.
Yeah.
People can change. But as I mentioned a few moments ago, that change, it can be difficult. A lot of people, these organizational monsters, they have ego and pride that is overflowing and very abundant. And when somebody has that in their life, it's difficult for them to overcome it. There many, many times has to be a life-changing circumstance for people
Mm-hmm.
to change.
Yeah.
I've had that occur, in my life. This Marine that I just talked to you about, that person had it occur in their life. But it doesn't always happen.
Yeah. That's really sad. So, any final thoughts on this topic?
Leaders lead, treat people well, confront the organizational monsters. Those of you who are putting together hiring panels or promotional panels, put the time and the effort into building systems and processes that really strive to eliminate the organizational monsters ahead of time.
Yeah.
In recruit academies, watch them, watch them, watch them, watch them. Pay attention and listen to any of those cues and clues and signs and indicators that there's a potential problem and nip it in the bud.
Yeah.
It comes back down to leadership courage and supervisory
Mm.
courage.
Well, I think those are some great final thoughts and great topics today that we talked about.
Yeah. Thank you, Emily, and thank you, everybody, for watching or listening.
Yeah.
And until the next episode, we'll see you later. Bye bye.
Bye.